Welcome to another episode of FoundHer Rising, the podcast for women founders in wellness, coaching, and consulting who are ready to build businesses that create freedom, impact, and income. I'm your host, Christine Hakkola, business coach, former psychotherapist, and mentor to women scaling service-based businesses. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Joanne Archibald, historian, published academic, and founder of Livy Consulting. Joanne has carved out an incredibly unique space in the world of business storytelling and corporate heritage, blending deep historical expertise with a strategic eye for how companies connect with their audiences. She has already attracted meaningful client work and is now exploring what growth can look like for a business that's both niched and full of possibility. So here's my question for you, listener, as we dive in. What happens when the work you love is getting traction, and how do you shape what comes next? That's what we're going to explore with Joanne today. If you're curious about the evolution of a truly original business, you'll love this conversation. Please welcome the insightful and brilliantly grounded Dr. Joanne Archibald. Hi, Joanne.
Hi, Christine. Thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you here. You've just stuck in my mind since the first time we met, and I cannot wait to take the conversation a little deeper today. I would love to start off by you just telling our listeners what you do. What is your business?
Yes, sure. So Livy Consulting is a full service historical consulting firm. And what I mean by that is I work with businesses who are looking to better leverage or utilize their heritage in whatever way works for their audience. So for some people, that could be they're hosting an event and they want someone to come in and speak about the history of their business. For some other businesses, it might be they're looking to celebrate their 50th anniversary and they want to have someone write a chapter in a book or produce a coffee table book that creates sort of an understanding of what this business has been like over 50 years. Ultimately, I'm really interested in helping businesses tell their story, use their heritage to connect with their employees, with their clients, even with the public, and recognize the value that that heritage holds for their business, because it's one of those things that you can't buy, you can't fake. Heritage is uniquely yours. And so I want businesses to recognize that that is a great space to be in when you're trying to carve out a unique space in your industry.
Yeah. I just love this so much. Full confession, I am not a historian at all. I skipped out of as many history classes as I could in high school. But
That's okay.
for whatever reason, this business is so interesting to me, and I just find it so unique. I've never heard of anything like it. I remember you describing the first time we met that your relationship with history is kind of like a love affair. I
Yes,
would love for you to say a little bit more about that, or like just take us back in time to when that evolved.
Yes. So it is truly one of those things that I have loved for almost my whole life. I do remember the time in grade 4 when my teacher started teaching us about medieval times, the Middle Ages, and I was absolutely hooked. It was one of those things I just loved from the beginning. And I do feel like history is simply learning about people, the past, sharing stories, understanding what made people motivated, what makes them tick. And frankly, I think that really it's just about studying us in a different time period. So I've always loved history. When I worked at Historica Canada making Heritage Minutes, the Canadians who are listening might know the famous the Heritage Minute series. That was really an opportunity where I felt like I got to live this history dream, and it's always stuck with me. That was sort of the dream job as a young, fresh out of graduate school uh, opportunity job, and I've been chasing history ever since.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. Thank you for sharing that part of the story. If I remember correctly, you had told me previously that you were in the throes of doing your PhD when
Yes.
you started Livy Consulting. Most people, I think, would find that very overwhelming to do a PhD and start a business at the exact same time. Tell us a little bit about like how that was for you and what led you to the decision of starting your consulting business in the midst of your PhD.
Yes, it is a great question because it does seem like I bit off a little bit more than I could chew. And frankly, those people that know me know that I tend to do that. I like to overcommit to stuff and then the way out of it.
I think a few listeners can resonate.
That's been my MO for a long time, and I'm learning how to sort of manage that. But I so to back up a little bit, I during the very in 2020, I was working at a job that I liked, but wasn't history based. It's the only job I've ever had that wasn't in history.
Wow.
And I I started it and I almost immediately knew that wasn't going to be able to do this forever. It was one of those things that I took the job because it was an interesting opportunity. It gave me private sector experience, and I really wanted to see what a work environment was like without this thing that I had been doing forever, which was history that I loved.
Yeah.
Turns out it wasn't for me. And part of the reason it was also not for me was because I realized that I wanted to stay in history, and I felt like I owed it to myself, to my passion, to the subject, to try and see if I could make something work in this field. I also had a history of not being well. I had cancer as a 25-year-old.
Wow.
And so surviving that experience has also shaped the way in which I approach entrepreneurship and working
Mhm.
in this field.
Yeah.
I'm alive today, and that's amazing. And that's
Wow.
something I don't want to waste. And
Uh-huh.
so for me, not wasting it means I'm going to bet on myself and try as hard as I can to make something in history work, because it's truly my passion and my biggest driving, motivating fact of life. But
Mm.
back to your question, the PhD came about because I was in this job that I wanted. It was great, but I needed to do history again. And I had done some research into businesses that did this, and the answer was there were none. I did a lot of
I'm
trying to
not
figure out,
surprised.
does anyone work in this field? Like, is there some job opportunity I could apply to? No, there wasn't. So I had seen
Mm.
a few people do it from a freelance perspective, which was great, but
Yeah.
all of those people had a PhD. So then I said, okay, I am going to go back to school. I'm going to start the PhD with the attitude of I'm going to then link to working in this business. I'm going to start this business halfway through the PhD so that I can sort of scale it up enough that by the time I'm
Mhm.
finishing the PhD, it can be a full-time gig.
Smart.
So that's sort of the route I took to starting the business, giving it some lead up time to allow it to be a full-time thing when I finished the PhD.
Mhm.
And in the middle of the PhD, I was using it purely as an additional income stream. Anyone who's gone through grad school knows
Yes.
that you're going from, a real big girl salary and a real job to a student salary.
Yeah.
And it was helpful from that perspective. But it was also a chance for me to go slowly and learn how to build a website, how
Mhm.
to reach out to clients, how to do client work. And most of the early client work I did was with people who I knew from a previous job or who I had met somewhere along the line. And that was a really good way to sort of ease myself into the business. And
Yeah.
then now that I'm finished the PhD, it's full steam ahead and working towards trying to grow. So the PhD was a nice
Wow.
opportunity to take on the work, but also it allowed me to grow at the right pace, I think.
Gosh, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I personally resonate with a lot of what you shared, especially the piece about needing something supplemental if you're the
Yeah.
one putting yourself through school. I didn't do a PhD, but I did do a master's. And I was just remembering back to I was teaching yoga in a local studio just to get through my master's degree. And similar to you, also started to seed, my psychotherapy practice before I graduated. So it sounds crazy, but also really smart if you have the resources and the support and the foresight to be able to do something like that.
Mhm.
Um, I would like to hear a little bit more, and I suspect that the listeners would as well. You had a very clear vision as you went into your PhD about what you wanted to create, the impact that you wanted to have. Could you say a little bit about what was the impact that you wanted to have on your clients when you launched Livy Consulting, and how has that changed over the years?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think anyone who has gone down an entrepreneurial path will recognize the importance of being able to pivot. And
Yes, I get
that's
that.
something I learned very quickly. And having had zero business background, I felt like I was a little bit flying by the seat of my pants at the beginning, trying to understand how to just frame myself and place myself in the right spot. Initially, I wanted to consult for film and television production companies because that was what I had learned at Historica Canada, making heritage minutes. I had
Mhm.
seen that world. I understood
Sense.
what it was like to consult on a film, how to make sure that set design and casting and wardrobes were all period appropriate, this sort of thing. That was the initial goal of Livy Consulting, was to create a full office for a Netflix, an Amazon to come to me and
Wow.
say, "Hey, Joanne, we want to make a film about pick a topic." And then I would say, "Great. let me take that away and I'll do the research and I'll pitch to you, 5 different ways to frame this story about, the Canadians in the Second World War or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Very
And
nice.
that's still a piece of the Livy vision. I have not let that die totally because it
Uh-huh.
is I think film is a fabulous medium to engage people in history, and it's one thing that I want to continue to do.
Uh-huh.
However, what I learned is that film has a long lead up time from idea to creation. And that I learned through multiple coffee conversations with people in the industry and people who have done this kind of work and how they get to a place where they're actually making money from this kind of work.
Uh-huh.
And that was not going to be the timeline that I needed it to be for my plan to work out for Livy to be a full-time job opportunity for me after the PhD. So then in January of this year, there was the beginnings of some geopolitical shifting that happened between the
Mhm.
US and
Yeah.
Canada. And
Mhm.
that to me was quite interesting because I started seeing businesses here in Canada really leaning on their Canadian legacies, their Canadian
Yes.
roots.
Yes.
And it sparked this thought in my head saying, you know what, I wonder if businesses could use my help. And
Oh my
turns out they
gosh.
can. So
I'm not surprised.
I shifted to work with other Canadian businesses who are looking for someone to help them take their history and showcase to their clients how they've been involved in community in Canada specifically, but not all of them, but a lot of them, and how the Canadian legacy, their Canadian roots have shaped their business. And so that has been a really great pivot for me. And it's aligned on all of my things that I enjoy doing, which is talking
Uh-huh.
about the history of Canada and engaging with people who are interested in learning more about their commitment to community and their values and showcasing to even business executives, hey, look, you have this stated value that you have on your website.
Yeah.
And here's actually how you've held that value over 100 years. Here are historical examples of this business doing this value or living this value. So that's been a really great opportunity for me. And I've really loved being able to help businesses tell their stories in a way that they perhaps hadn't thought of before.
Wow, your passion for this just shines through when you talk. I'm so appreciative of it. I just love hearing about female entrepreneurs'
History
passion, the
nerd
thing that brings them to
forever.
life.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing. As you're talking, I'm remembering a concept one of my mentors taught me a while back around niching. She's an expert in niching and branding and brand messaging, and she was teaching me about the three legs of a stool of your niche. And the way I was kind of mapping what you were sharing is it sounds like the film and TV production was like your first leg of the stool. You thought
Hmm.
that was maybe going to be your only one, and that was going to be your focus. And then, due to geopolitical events, things that you couldn't have foreseen, you suddenly realize there's another leg of the stool, right? And I was waiting to hear if like, is there a third leg or is that maybe coming in the future? But you talked about companies in general and then also business executives. So it just gets my, futuristic mind spinning of like, what's next for you, which leads me into my next question. Um, as you gain traction and as you piece together your niche and the legs of your stool, so to speak, what do you imagine is on the horizon for Livy Consulting next?
It is a great question. And I love the stool analogy too, because I think there's so much strength in obviously having multiple pillars that you can lean on, but also developing the expertise for multiple wheelhouses, I think is great. I've never been one to be placed in a specific box, and I enjoy the
Yeah.
opportunity to, be as well rounded as possible and to, continually learn myself and stretch myself in learning new things.
Hmm.
Um, where I see myself going is, I think, exciting. I want to continue building this business acumen working with businesses
Yeah.
because I find that really rewarding. And I think that there's lots of opportunity there.
Yes.
I also think a third stool leg potentially might be the political world because many
Oh,
political actors need support in terms of understanding party history,
oh, that
their
makes so much
personal
sense.
history and how that comes
Yes.
into how they market themselves. And of course, understanding the context, both of the time we are in now, but also what historical eras
Yeah.
in their specific region or country reflect what perhaps we're dealing with today, or and
Mhm.
how can they lean on those historical examples in both their policy but also in the way that they speak to their constituents. So that could be a potential third tool that I'm exploring.
Absolutely. And just as you said it, it feels like all the pieces kind of fell into place, but knowing, of
But
course,
I also
that
think
may
as
shift.
well, I would like to build out my work with sort of C-suite executives in terms
Yeah.
of their leadership, because I think too, similar to a political figure, they have a unique personal history that they bring to their leadership, and also how they can use the intersection of their personal history with the business history or the company history and put those things together, and how they market themselves as the leader of this company, leaning on their heritage and
Mhm.
the business's heritage as well. So I think that piece is interesting to me too, in terms of understanding how I could support people in leadership roles, and provide them with that sort of extra piece of whether it's marketing, it's communications, it's how they're positioning themselves, and how they're engaging with their clients, but also their own employees and the public.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we tread into the territory of growth and expansion and what's next, and we've talked about your niche, you've mentioned marketing, your visibility having a bigger impact. What kind of support do you imagine you're going to need, both, in terms of people as well as like potential shifts in your business model in order to keep growing? And what do you think is going to be your growing edge as a leader, as a business owner, as you embark on this next phase?
It is a good question, and I think it's one of those things as well that I'm learning as an entrepreneur. You've got to continuously stretch yourself. Once you get comfortable in a phase, it's time to move to
Uh-huh.
the next phase. I'm learning
Yes.
this.
Growth
Um,
doesn't always feel comfortable, nor should
no,
it.
it doesn't. Absolutely not. Now I feel like I've become quite good at managing the business by myself, but I also know that that's not no way to grow. I'm only one person and I can't grow the business the way that I want to by myself. So in terms of next steps, I have a lovely volunteer who I know through my high school alumni network. She's
Wow.
helping me with some interesting social media ideas and sort of generating leads on what I should be doing on social media, helping me to expand to different platforms. So that's one.
Awesome. Yeah.
The other is I'm approaching a couple of business schools, and they run co op opportunities for students who are looking for real life job experience, and partnering with the federal government on some of those student grants so that I
Neat.
can hire a student to help me for periods of time and give them real life experience and helping me do some of the heavy lifting on the research, because I'm doing the outreach to clients on things like LinkedIn and other sort of platforms, but I want to do some more targeted research to associations, organizations that I think might be
Yeah.
who might need my help.
Yeah.
And so could really use some research heavy lifting on that. So I'm going to try and work with a student on that, which would be great.
Hmm.
And my ultimate dream, though, beyond those things, is I do know the academic world quite well,
Yeah.
and as someone who has had the good fortune of studying with plenty of smart, able PhDs, the job market for academics is not great. The stat I
Hmm.
think now
Hmm.
is less than 1 in 10 people with a PhD actually get a tenure track job.
Yes. My wife has a tenured track job, so I completely understand and
Yeah,
appreciate
so one
that.
of the lucky ones, good for her.
Well,
And
she's post tenure track now, but I know
yeah,
how hard it was to get and
and
to
you know
achieve.
what? I'm sure she's brilliant, and of course she does a wonderful job. But the trouble of getting those jobs is really challenging, and I know so many smart people, and I'd love to eventually hire other history PhDs who want to share their
Mm.
passion for history,
Yes.
who can't get a tenure track job, not because they're not smart enough, but because there's just literally not enough jobs for everyone.
Yeah.
And then have Livy Consulting be the opportunity, the place where PhDs can go to work, whether that's on contract or on I can hire them to really share their passion for the subject. Because I think it's terrible that these people who are working so hard and have this advanced degree and really love the subject and are so passionate about it just have nowhere to
No.
go.
Yeah.
And not to say that there are no way, like there are plenty of jobs that you can infuse with history. And, I always direct people to
Mhm.
marketing and communications as a field because it's a really great field for someone who loves history because it is storytelling and it's how you engage people in a certain story and narrative.
Mhm.
But that's my big dream, is to be a place where I can hire these PhDs who are so passionate and care so much about the subject and want to use it and can
Mhm.
use it in a business sense and just not in a necessarily hardcore academic sense.
Yeah, yeah. I really appreciate the multi-tiered lens that you look through in the growth of your business. So often I hear from folks about their mission or their vision to help people, which is amazing, right? You're already helping companies, with their marketing, with their
Mhm.
communication, growing their culture. And, as you look to the future, I'm just really appreciating this other layer of as you grow your company, it's not just about hiring a team, it's about providing a space where historians, where academics can come to thrive and have a career
Mhm.
outside of the traditional professions. I just want to reflect for a second, Joanne, on all the balls you seem to have in the air, which is really indicative of the stage of business that you're at. I don't think I've met a single entrepreneur who has reached this level of success and that hasn't started to feel like they're juggling a lot of things. You talked about lead generation, you talked about marketing, you talked about bringing on a student and doing research, right? And the things you didn't mention that I know exist are the actual service delivery.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The actual work.
Right, so it's a lot, it's a lot, and, if I'll just offer, the order that I encourage my clients to start to outsource in is, like, all that administrative stuff that starts
Hmm.
to get really heavy that you don't need to be doing. That
Yes.
might be a thing to get off your plate next. The cold outreach as well. Sometimes that scares people is thinking about outsourcing certain parts of the work that they're doing, and in order to grow, we have to find a way to capture the essence of us and the way we do things and then train other people well to do those things. Otherwise, we just become the bottleneck. Right.
Totally.
And that's part of my mission is helping female entrepreneurs avoid that burnout, avoid that bottleneck so that they can do the thing that they are born to do, that they are passionate about, and just grow wildly successful businesses. And I'm just so excited to see you on that path.
Thank you, Christine. That's very kind of you. And for the
Of
advice.
course.
I do know that I need to, admin is definitely also on the list of
Yeah.
things I need to outsource. 100% yes.
I'm glad to hear it. I have one final question for you. Well, maybe two, Joanne, but one related to what we're talking about here is you talked a little bit about like your ultimate dream and wanting to bring on other people into the company, to serve alongside you. If you just look at your moonshot, like 10 years out, can you just give a brief description of what you imagine Livy Consulting doing, like what does the presence look like in the world?
It's a great question. And it is so fun to think 10 years down the line and sort of envision where I feel like I'm going to be, which is so great.
It's kind of an
I
ironic question to ask a historian, but
No, it's good. I mean, historians also need to think forward. And my favorite thing as a historian is being able to apply history to the present and the future and
Yeah.
say, in the 1950s, we, Canada, thought outside of the box and helped to build these three radar line systems in the north in inhospitable terrain. And that was something we had never done before. And now we're looking at, okay, how can we have outside of the box thinking? We have done so before. Let's do so again.
Mm.
History is a great blueprint to say these people have done things that were thought to be outside of the box. And so we need to now also think outside of the box,
Yeah.
and think forward in terms of how we're going to do things differently, but also make decisions that people have been making for years. Where
Yeah.
I see myself in 10 years, I see Livy Consulting being a hub of historical research excellence. I
Uh-huh.
see Livy Consulting being a thought leader in the business history space, but also in using history as storytelling for brands. I see Livy Consulting working in the political world and working to support political figures in using history to their advantage, but also helping history shape policy and discussions around making decisions for whatever level of government they're in.
Mhm.
And ultimately, I just see Livy Consulting being a big business where all the history nerds can kind of work together and share their passion for the subject, but also have an opportunity to really use their skills, whether it's research, writing, synthesizing, speaking. I'd love to do a lot more speaking and engage people in talking through why history matters and why it should matter for your business. But ultimately, it's just a hub where all of the history lovers can come together and share their passion for the subject and help people realize its importance in their daily lives, but also in their businesses.
Yeah. Well, I personally think that outside of the box thinking, Joanne, is gonna take you really, really far, and I wish you so much success, and I hope in one way, shape, or form, whether it's just a cheerleader or elsewise, to be able to support you in bringing that to life, because I just see the value in the work that you're doing and can only imagine you being just so successful.
Thank you
This
very
has been
much.
really fun and really exciting for me to hear about your vision and what you're building in the world. Before we wrap up, I'd love for you to share what's the best way for listeners to connect with you or learn more about your work.
Great. Yes. The best way for you guys to connect with me is to find me on LinkedIn. It's Joanne Archibald, PhD, or visit my website, www.livyconsulting.ca.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And thank you so much, Joanne, for sharing your inspiring vision with us and sharing about the unique industry and space that you work in. And thank you, listener, for tuning in to FoundHer Rising. If today's episode resonated with you, make sure to follow the show, share it with another founder, and leave a quick review. It helps more women find these conversations. You can always connect with me on LinkedIn or learn more about how I support women grow and scale service-based businesses at hucklehorizons.com. Until next time, keep rising and keep building the business that gives you the freedom to live, lead, and create on your terms.